Hi guys, it's Allie. How you been? So it is now July, which means that it is time for the second session of Camp NaNoWriMo, and because it is July and Camp NaNoWriMo has started, and also because it's been just over a year since my last post on this channel, I thought now would be a perfect time to come back and share with you guys what I've been working on in this interim. Honestly, I've been wanting to get back into recording videos and uploading them to this channel for the longest time, but I just haven't really had the time or the bandwidth to do it, and so this has kind of been my perfect opportunity to come back and chat with you guys and to share what's been going on with me and where we're gonna go from here. So the last time we spoke was when I had finished the first draft of my YA fantasy novel, which I then called the Rowan book, but I now have been referring to as DOS. And that draft was really a part first draft, part zero draft, and part third draft, because I had done the cardinal sin of going back and restarting the book, I think 2 or 3 times in the course of me writing that first draft. So parts of it had been through 3 iterations, and parts of it were still in a zero drafting phase where there were entire scenes that hadn't even been written yet. And so when I finished that book, I felt really excited, and I was really happy to have finally finished it, and I was also really eager to move on creatively to new things with the full assumption that I would return to it later. Now, having said that, I did actually try to jump straight into edits for this project because I was really riding the high of finishing that first draft, and I wanted to just get to work on finishing the book entirely, but that was a mistake. You know when you say one word over and over and over again, it starts to feel like it doesn't have any meaning anymore? That was kind of how I felt working on this project for so long and so tirelessly. And I went into those edits still really excited about the story and still loving the characters and everything like that, but it was kind of like trying to define a word that I had forgotten the definition of. I was trying to contextualize this thing that I no longer really fully understood the importance of, or why I wanted to be working on it in the first place. It was more so just the ambition of, I want to finish this book and have a completed thing that I can print out and give to people. And so I forced myself to stop and calm down and firmly put that book away for a bit. When I say a bit, of course, I mean a year. And I know that's a long time to take off from a project, but with the amount of time that I had spent working almost exclusively on that project, I think it was a fair amount of time. I think it was a fair break, and I needed every second of it in retrospect. That's not to say that I haven't been writing at all, though. Actually, I've written more in this past year than I feel like I've written in any year prior, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I finally gave myself the creative license to just work on whatever the heck I wanted to work on. So even though I haven't been working on this DOS story, I have been working on that sci-fi story that I mentioned to you in my last video. I wrote that for NaNoWriMo and finished it a few months later, the first draft at least, and I've also been doing a lot of thought dumping and some drafting for 2 different contemporary stories, a separate sci-fi YA, and then also a historical / fantasy retelling type thing as well that we can talk more about later. But I finally had all of this opportunity to work on these different projects, in large part due to the fact that I didn't feel like I had to be working on the DOS story all the time. Because I was so excited by these bright, new, shiny ideas, and because I was so liberated by this idea that I could work on whatever I wanted to and not really feel like I needed to draft just one thing at a time, I felt tempted for a while to completely shelve the DOS story, to just leave it alone and let it live and die on my computer. Now, I've written 2 or 3 manuscripts before this that all also only got a first draft, so leaving this one to rot wouldn't have been without precedent, but something about this book, probably the fact that I've spent so much of my time and dedication to making it and to finishing it, I never quite felt ready to take that step and to fully abandon it. It was always kind of in the back of my mind, even when I wasn't actively thinking about it. The other thing about this story that cannot be said of those other manuscripts that I wrote in high school and college was that these characters truly live within me. I have thought about them so much, and I have really worked with them so much through the course of all of these different drafting phases that they are now a part of me, and I can't change that. Whether or not the story ever gets published, they are now real to me, and I have to kind of give them the respect that they deserve by finishing the book. I just couldn't do that at any point this past year. A lot of times when we talk about creativity, we talk about this idea of refilling the well, and a lot of people mean that in the sense of you refill the well by making a Pinterest board for your characters, or you refill the well by making a Spotify playlist, and all of these things are things that aren't really writing, but they do put you in the mindset of thinking about your story and thinking about your characters and giving you the kind of motivation to write that you might not have had before. For me, refilling the well meant completely stepping away and ignoring the well for a very long time. Because of that distance, initially I wasn't aware that the well was even refilling. I still thought of the story often, like I said, and I thought about the characters, and they still felt very real to me. But anytime that I opened up the project or thought about opening up the project, I would get this sinking feeling in my gut that would just tell me to stop. And I think as writers and creatives in general, sometimes we need to learn to move past that feeling, because we might mistake that feeling for any number of things, like writer's block or depression, or that story just being bad and you not wanting to work on it because it's a waste of time. And I do think a lot of times we do need to push past that thought. But in this case, I think it was my mind trying to tell me that the well was still healing, that the part of me that loved this story was still regenerating itself, and I just needed to wait a second and give it some time. Because recently, seemingly out of nowhere, I started thinking about this story again, and not just the kind of passing thoughts that I would have before of, oh, I should really get back to working on that, but instead I would think about how the characters would react to something, or I would think about some new world-building tool that I could use to further develop the world that the story takes place in. I would think of new names for cities and new types of powers in the magic system and all of these different things. I was not just thinking of that, but I was thinking of new plot developments and new scene beats, ways to do the same thing that my first draft had done, but do it better. And that was kind of the moment that I had been waiting for, to the point where the next time that I opened up that document, I didn't immediately shut it. I actively started working on the project again. And that was like a month ago. And ultimately I share this because I think it's good for us writers to know that this can happen, that you can put something aside and let yourself just kind of be a hobbyist for a while, which is really what I've been in the past year. I still want to publish books, and that hasn't changed, and I don't imagine it ever will, because writing is just such a fundamental part of my personality and everything that I am. But I do think that letting yourself have that break and have that moment to breathe is really helpful, especially if you're in a position like me where I'm not under any contracts. Nobody is asking me to have a book finished by a certain date. The only person expecting those things of me is me, and I'm allowed to set the pace for myself. Now, of course, in the future, when I do hope to publish books, whether it be this book or some other book, I am going to be beholden to deadlines and things like that. But I know myself well enough to know that there is nothing that gets me going like some good old-fashioned terror and procrastination. But in the meantime, while I am just working on honing my craft and getting this story finished that I have had living within me for so long, I think it's okay to just breathe and to take a break and to let yourself write whatever you want to write about, whether it is a new manuscript or an old one or something that you wrote 15 years ago that you're just coming back to now. Do whatever you need to do, and the story will be waiting for you. The characters will be waiting for you. And I don't feel like the story is any worse for me having waited so long. In fact, I feel like it is demonstrably better. It is objectively better now than it could have been if I continued editing it right after I finished the book last June. And a big part of that is because I've learned lessons now that I did not know back then. Partly because I'm a year older now and I've learned a lot of different things about life in that time, but also because the story is now benefiting not just from the lessons that I learned from that first draft or from the 1.5 draft or the 1.57 whatever draft, but from the things that I've worked on since then, from that sci-fi story, from those contemporary stories. I've learned new things about the craft, both from reading books and watching videos and just from writing myself, that I would not have had if I tried to jump straight into edits right after I finished that first draft. I came up with the idea for this story 10 years ago. And in that time, it has completely changed. There are so many things about it that are different now than they were before, but some of the things have stayed the same, and most of those things are the characters. And at this point, now that the well has refilled and I feel like I am equipped to take on this story again, I don't just feel like it deserves to be finished. I don't just feel like the characters deserve to have this story told because I've spent so much time with them and now kind of have this weird feeling that they are somewhat real inside my mind, but because I want to finish it. I just wanna. And so I will. That's a really empowering thing to feel when you are like me and the idea of expectations can sometimes freeze you in your tracks. Just the knowledge that not only does the story deserve to be finished, but I just want to. I just want to do it. I want to finish it. And I think that's a really great thing to feel as a writer. So anyway, guess what I'm working on for Camp NaNoWriMo this year?